Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Friends in High Places, Navigating Friends Group Partnerships. This is Emily Hermans, Museum Services Program Specialist for the Texas Historical Commission. Thank you for joining us today. Your presenter this afternoon is Angela Reed, the Community Partnerships Coordinator for the Texas Historical Commission's Historic Sites Division. Before I turn things over to Angela, I want to briefly share some information with you about the THC's Museum Services Program. Museum Services provides support, resources, and training to museums in Texas, particularly the over 1,000 small history museums. We provide free consultations on a wide range of topics, and we're here to support you whether you are working from home or your museum has reopened. We offer regular free webinars like this one on a wide range of topics, and all of our webinars are archived on our webpage and can be viewed there at any time. We have recordings of over 60 webinars on topics such as podcasting, collections care, and social justice. Our web address is on your screen. It's thc.texas.gov/museum-services. Our helpful resources page is full of web-based and downloadable museum resources on a wide range of topics. And on the grants and fundraising page, you'll find a lengthy list of grant opportunities available to museums in Texas. Our Connect and Learn page includes information about upcoming free webinars hosted by other organizations and lists of both national and Texas-based groups and professional organizations for museums. Finally, please know that Laura Casey and I are always available to help our museum colleagues across the state in any way that we can, so please don't hesitate to contact us for support. Our final webinar of this calendar year is listed on your screen. Next week, Nicole Riley will discuss nonprofit budgeting and finance. Registration is currently open on our webpage, and we hope that you can join us. There are also many other free webinars offered each week by other organizations. I've listed just a few highlights on the screen. A complete list of these is updated daily and can be found at thc.texas.gov/museum-connections. Now, before I introduce our presenter today, I want to ask that if you have questions during this afternoon's presentation, please type them into the questions box in your control panel, and we will answer them at the end. Our webinar provider does not have a platform for group chat, so your questions and comments will only be seen by me. Today's slides and handout are available for download in the handout section of your control box. This webinar is being recorded, and both the recording and the resources will be available on our webpage within the next day or so. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter. Angela Reed is the Community Partnerships Coordinator for the THC's Historic Sites Division. In her career of almost 20 years working in both the nonprofit and public sectors, Angela has also served as a historian for Texas Parks and Wildlife, Program Director and Interim Executive Director for Preservation Austin, and Development Manager for the Historic Paramount Theater. Angela holds a Master's in Humanities and Public History from New York University and a Bachelor's in Sociology from St. Edward's University. And she's certified in training, consulting, and facilitation from Marlborough College. And with that, Angela, I am going to shift the webinar controls over to you so that you can take it away.
Great, thank you, Emily. And I'm going to hide my camera so y'all can see my slides better, probably. Get to my screen.
Perfect.
Can you see it?
Yep,
fantastic.
Looks great.
Okay, so we're off and running. So welcome, everybody. As Emily said, my name is Angela Reed. I work with the Friends Groups organizations that support our state historic sites all over Texas. It's a great pleasure of mine. It's the best job in the world, I swear. I love having a foot in both the agency folks who steward our historic sites and our Friends Groups who are the people in the community who have great passion for our historic sites. So it's a lot of fun to work with them. This is me with a camel, yes. I'm at one of our Texas State Historic Sites, and this is at one of our cavalry forts in West Texas. This particular one is Fort McCavitt, and in Texas we have this kind of quirky history about the U.S. Army bringing in camels in the 1850s because they thought it would be helpful for our infantry in this dry, arid land. What they didn't count on was the rail system going through the western states, and so the camels weren't as useful as they thought they would be. But when we have these fantastic events at our West Texas sites, there's a camel guy who manages a herd of camels, and he brings them out to our sites so that we can really buttress that interpretation about the camel history of our infantry in West Texas. And I'll tell you that it's because of the Friends groups that we're able to do things like that. It's Friends group organizations that really put the icing on the cake when we have these programs and events at our historic sites. And I'm sure, and I hope that's true for a lot of your organizations as well. So I didn't come here to talk about camels, although you're welcome to look up that history. It's really interesting. What we will discuss are Friends groups, what they are, what they aren't. We'll talk a little bit about establishing a Friends group and how to do that. But what we'll really talk about are best practices for a Friends group, because honestly, that's the common denominator of all of these topics, is the best practices. And how we get to best practices, you'll see, is going to be communication, communication, communication. I will talk a lot about communication. I've included a couple of photos here. The top one is so we can remember what it was like to get into a room and have these seminars. There are pros and cons to that. The pros of doing these webinars is we get to reach so many people. The cons, is that we don't get to meet in person. But you may remember that in seminars, you'll probably be sitting in a cold room. You may have some stale coffee. You may have some individually wrapped, I don't know, pretzels or peanuts or something. But in this particular seminar, what you can't see is past that window is this incredible, gorgeous mansion on the coast of Texas called the Fulton Mansion. And the Friends group there provided fresh coffee and quiche and a pie, and they had popcorn popping in the lobby. And then afterwards, they had this fantastic reception so that people could get to know each other and really network on a more personal basis. Those are the types of things that our Friends groups are fantastic about, and we just appreciate them so much. So before I went on, I wanted to kind of give the kudos to, Friends groups like the Friends of Fulton Mansion, the Friends of Fort McCavitt, all of these Friends groups that I work with, and I hope you get the pleasure of working with wonderful Friends groups as well. So before I move on, I'd like to launch a poll. So Emily's going to launch the first poll. I want to find out who's in the room. Are you a board member? Are you a general member? Are you thinking of starting a Friends group? Are you staff of an organization with or without a Friends group, or something else, which you can enter in the chat box?
All right, so that poll should be up on your screen, and you can choose one of these options. If you happen to be having trouble selecting which of the 5, you may need to minimize a little bit, exit out of full screen for your webinar viewer, and then you should be able to make a selection. We'll give everyone a moment to respond. All right, we've got about 85% of you have responded, so I think we'll go ahead and close the poll, and I'll share the results.
Great.
And you can see we have 5% are a board member of a Friends group, just 1% a general member of a Friends group. We have 11% of folks here who say they're thinking of starting a Friends group, and then 75% are staff of an organization that with or without a Friends group. And then we have 8% other, and some of those others include students, president or vice president of a historical society or a Friends group, someone who's looking to start a Friends group. So looks like the bulk of our folks here today are staff.
Great. Okay. Well, then I think that no matter where you are on the spectrum, what I have to say will speak to you. So I'll try to talk a lot to staff who are sounds like looking to form a Friends group possibly. There's a second poll. I want to find out what type of organization you represent, whether you're staff or a Friends group. So Emily, do you mind launching that second poll?
There we go. So yes, let us know if you represent a historic site, a natural area or a park, a museum, a library, or something else. And if it's something else, tell us what that is. All right, we've got about 80% of folks have responded. Some good other responses coming in.
Great.
So give you all just a couple more seconds and we'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results. All right, let's see here. Okay, so we have 20% from historic sites, 4% from a natural area or park, 55% from a museum, 5% from a library, and 17% from other. And some of those others include archives, both state and local. We have some from academic museums. We've got some county historical commissions. What else am I seeing? That covers most of it. Oh, a few people who are from places that kind of fall into multiple categories, like a historic site / museum / park. So, but 55% museum.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'd love to know who's listening, who's working on these issues, and thank y'all for filling that out really quickly. Well, let's get started, and let's start with some definitions. What is a friends group? So you may think you know the answer, and maybe you do, but a friends group is a supporting nonprofit that exists to provide assistance to another organization. And I'm going to focus mostly on organizations that are publicly owned because those are the organizations that I work with, I have a lot of experience with. But I think whether you're a publicly owned organization, and what I mean by that is by an organization that gets the majority of its funding from the state, federal, or municipality. So state parks, national parks, state historic sites, a city-owned museum. We're talking about friends group organizations or a supporting nonprofit. They're not necessarily called friends groups. Sometimes they're foundations, sometimes they're associations or something else. But it's a supporting nonprofit that its sole reason is to provide support to another organization that has another funding source. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The Friends Group mission statement is almost always tied to the mission statement of their partner organization. So again, they are there to support that organization. A few examples that I thought I'd show you are here in Austin. We have, if you've ever been to Austin, Barton Springs Pool, I'm sure you've heard of it if you've been here. There's a friends group for Barton Springs Pool. That's a city-owned pool. It's actually a natural spring that's enclosed as a pool area, and there's a friends group for that Barton Springs Pool, and their mission statement is to create a community of people dedicated to restoring, improving, and maintaining that pool. We also have a Friends of the LBJ Library. The LBJ Library is part of a federally funded system of presidential libraries, so it's owned by the federal government. It also has a partnership with the University of Texas, but they have a friends group organization, and their mission statement is to preserve and protect the historical materials in the collection, to increase public awareness, to advance the LBJ's standing as a center for intellectual activity and for community leadership. And I can tell you that friends group, that Friends of LBJ Library, that has this phenomenal speaker series where they bring in public policy experts, they bring in people involved in civic engagement, and they talk about that. So the Friends of LBJ Library support the LBJ Library. Another example, Friends of Casa Navarro. Casa Navarro is a state, it was one of our Texas Historical Commission state historic sites. We own the building, but they have a friends group organization that's very involved in partnering with that particular site to share the legacy of the namesake of that building, Tejano patriot Jose Antonio Navarro, and they preserve and enhance this building's the original 19th century home that Navarro lived in. And they also applied for and really did the legwork for making that building a National Historic Landmark. That's their mission statement, is to preserve that building. So just some of those examples show you that their mission statement is part and parcel to the organization they support. That is their sole purpose. So why? Why would these organizations that are funded by the federal government, the state government, or a municipality, why would they need a Friends group? I'll bet some of you know the answer to that if you're staff, but Friends groups do what their partner organization, and I'm calling the partner organization, that's the organization that they have that they're going to support. They do what their partner organization cannot. And there are quite a few things that if you are a publicly owned organization, a museum, library, state historic site, national park, state park, any of those, there are quite a few things that you cannot do because you are a publicly owned organization. One of those things is to directly fundraise and solicit monetary and in-kind donations. As a state employee, I cannot ask for donations. The site managers cannot ask for donations explicitly. They can set up that mechanism maybe for people to do that, but they can't be the ones to solicit those donations. But a Friends group organization that organizes separately and independently from that organization as a 501c3, as a nonprofit, can ask for donations. They also, if you are an employee of a publicly owned organization, you can't explicitly advocate for your site, for your museum, for your library. You can inform, you can educate to elected officials, but you can't say, and I ask for your vote for this way or the other that will support my site. But a Friends group can do that. They're an independent 501c3, an independent nonprofit, and they have the ability to advocate for your site. And then the next two things, to promote and to organize volunteers and grassroots support. This is something that Friends groups can really, really shine. And I know that as site staff or as museum staff or whatever organization you're representing, you can promote your organization and you can organize volunteers and you can even organize grassroots support. But it's a Friends group organization that oftentimes have the really deep roots to those communities. They're the organizations, the members of that oftentimes have lived in that community for a long time, or they have a very personal connection to the organization that they want to support. They have a personal reason that they love that place, and they can promote your organization in a way that staff, because you're a paid employee, may not be able to do. And that's because they send their kids to those schools. Maybe they know the county judge, maybe they know the elected officials, they know the small businesses in that town, they may be a small business owner themselves. So they have a real personal connection to the community, whereas site staff or museum staff or folks, especially if they're hired by federal or state organizations, they may have moved around a little bit in their field. But these Friends group members are often folks who are very tied to that local community. I'll tell you another thing too, why this is important, because if you're an organization and you're a staff member and you're trying to educate and inform maybe elected officials, you can't advocate, but you're letting them know what's going on with your site because you're hoping that they'll want to support you. Those elected officials want to see that you have community engagement, that there are folks that are volunteers who are not paid to be there, that they're volunteering to be ambassadors to your organization for your organization, and that they're not paid to be there. They really love your place. So it's important to have that type of advocacy or that type of ambassadorship from people in your organization, and to have Friends group support, to be able to demonstrate that to not only elected officials, but to anyone in your community. It'll go a long way to help really make your organization shine. So how does a Friends group get started? If you're an organization, a staff member from that organization who wants to start a Friends group, Or if you're a friends group who wants to get started because you really love an organization and you want to help them grow and build, how do you really make that happen? I would say the first thing that you want to do is to form a steering committee. You may already have a group of volunteers, but from those volunteers, maybe you want to get a group of focused individuals who can push that ball forward, who can really focus on the task at hand, because there's going to be some tasks at hand that they need to take care of. So get, half a dozen folks, or maybe 3 or 4, to form that steering committee and do the hard work of determining what type of friends group your organization is going to need. And then the very next thing you want to do is start communicating. And I know that sounds obvious, but it may not be. And here's why. If you talk to the leadership of a partner organization, they may have assumptions of what a friends group organization can do. And if you're the leader, if you're the leadership, or if you're the staff of an organization and you want to start a friends group, and if you come into it with assumptions that friends group, they're going to be the heavy hitter fundraisers for you, you may be disappointed. That may not be their starting point. They may not have a ton of resources from the folks that they know or from that community. So it may be that you need to start small. You really need to talk to the steering committee, and the steering committee hopefully has connections in the community. They know the resources that are out there that they can draw from. But talk between the staff people who want that friends group and the folks who want to organize for that organization, and try to find out what the assumptions are. Now, does the friends group who wants to support that organization, maybe they have assumptions. They know what that organization needs. But once they start talking to the leadership, maybe there's a really good reason that that organization isn't doing what the friends group think it needs. There may be some reason behind that. So start with communicating, talk about what you as a friends group organization can provide, talk about what it is the organization really needs. And if you're the organization, if you're the staff member who's wanting to start a friends group, really think through what it is that you're looking for from a friends group and write it down. Make a list. Make sure that you're able to articulate clearly what you need from this group of volunteers. And then if you're the friends group who's getting started, I would hope that you're going to think through very, very clearly about your intention to provide a supporting role. Are you truly wanting to provide a supporting role? And I say this because one way that friends groups can really get off track is if they have a group of their favorite people, a group of their closest friends who would like to use this organization as almost like their social club. And I'm not saying it happens a lot, but it can happen. And it's a way that folks can get off track. So make sure that your intention is truly to support that site, and that you're going to be open to hearing what that site needs from you. And I say this to even folks who aren't getting started. This can be to a friends group who's been there for 20 years. Every now and then, you really need to think very deliberately about what you're there for. And are you truly providing a supporting role to that organization? And then another important thing for you to talk about is how you're going to communicate in the future. What types of communication do you need between the partner organization and the friends group? We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. And then you're going to document all of the above. Make sure that this is what your steering committee is going to think through. What do each need? What are the assumptions you're bringing into the organization? What does the organization need? Can you provide that supporting role? Can you grow into that supporting role? How do you need to communicate? And what that's going to entail is how often do you communicate? Do you need a lot of interaction between the organization staff and the board members? How is that? How frequently you're going to communicate, and how is that going to work? And then make sure that you're writing that down. And then from there, that's where you organize the board. And your board members may or may not be the same people who are on your steering committee. In fact, they very likely won't be everybody from your steering committee. Your steering committee now has determined what types of resources they need from the community. They know what types of expertise they need on the board, and they may create a matrix and say, okay, we know we need a fundraiser. We know we need a marketer. We know we need, somebody who's really good at finance. Who in the community can we start approaching to organize this board? So you're going to organize your board at that point, and then it's going to be that board that does the real the legwork now of determining your mission, the vision, the goals. Not the steering committee, but the board has to do this work, and hopefully they're going to do that work in collaboration with the site staff, determining your mission, your vision, your goals. And remember, your mission as a Friends group is going to be tied to the organization that you're supporting. And then you're going to go through all of the more tedious part of it, which is drawing up the required documents by the IRS, by the Secretary of State, drawing up your bylaws, determining which policies you need as an organization, and then make sure that you're thinking about and writing up a memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement with the organization that you're partnering with. And that MOU or MOA is going to explicitly state what types of communication you need between the Friends group and the organization you support. For example, in our memorandum of agreement between our Friends groups and our site staff, we explicitly state that the organization staff member, the site manager is what we call them here. The site manager is an ex officio member of the board, and they're informed of every board meeting and invited to every board meeting. We explicitly state that they devise an annual plan together every year, and that makes it's to ensure that there are no surprises from the Friends groups and events or programs they want to hold, and that the organization staff has an opportunity to let the Friends groups what they need every year, so that the Friends group can make their determination on what they're able to support. Now, when we talk about the bylaws, the policies, the IRS filing, I want to remind you that we have this resource list that you can download, and there should be active links on that resource list that will take you to the IRS nonprofit page that tells you exactly how to file with the IRS. There are bylaws templates, and there are organizations that suggest policies for nonprofits, like the Association of Fundraising Professionals or the National Council of Fundraising Professionals. Places like that will tell you what types of policies are important in this day and age, because it changes. What types of policies your board should be aware of. So that's, those are the basics of getting started. And from there, your organization, your Friends group organization, hopefully can grow and build and form a membership group or a volunteer group or whatever that organization needs. So that's the getting started part. So let's talk a little bit about what Friends groups do generally and what they do not. So first of all, Friends groups normally are going to start their own 501c3, because the big thing that's different about a Friends group than the public agency that they support is that they can fundraise. They have a 501c3 or nonprofit status to be able to do that. Here at our agency, we also have a fiscal sponsorship option, because we have a Friends of the Texas Historical Commission, and that's like the big Friends group for our agency. And then smaller nonprofits that support our historic sites are able to organize as if they're a 501c3 under that umbrella. And I would suggest that if you have some type of option, that's a great way to go, because it helps you cut out a lot of the more tedious duties of a 501c3, especially if you have an all volunteer nonprofit organization. Try to find, an umbrella organization that's closely related that would be willing to do that. That'd be great if you can do it. If not, the Friends group can certainly start their own 501c3 status. The bottom line is they need a mechanism to fundraise legally. So what a Friends group does is they're responsible for following their IRS and Secretary of State laws, their guidelines, just like any other nonprofit. They're also responsible for their own governance, their donated funds. And this is important, because if you're a publicly owned organization, you want to make sure that the organization staff isn't really handling the Friends group's funds. Those are the Friends group's funds, the nonprofit's funds. This is the way that public organizations can get in trouble. You want to make sure that those funds are not commingled. The Friends Group is also responsible for its own advocacy, obviously, because that's another thing that, site staff really isn't supposed to do. Friends Group should be responsible for their own membership roles, because sometimes that can be an issue of confidentiality. If you have donors that are donating to that Friends Group organization, that donor has an expectation of having some measure of confidentiality, especially if they request it. So oftentimes the Friends Group needs to be the one that keeps those emails and their contact information and information about that donor, and not the public agency's organizational staff. Remember that the organization that you partner with, especially if they're a publicly owned organization, they have some limitations on what they can do with a Friends Group, and let's just get to that. The partner organization staff is responsible for their own leadership. They're responsible to their own leadership, their industry standards of their organization. They are not accountable to your Friends Group board. And this is important because I know that sounds logical right now as we talk about it, because Friends Group is separate. But sometimes you can have a Friends Group and say their leadership, they bring on a new chair who has a lot of experience with nonprofits, and maybe that chair is accustomed to communicating with the executive staff as if they're accountable to the board, because in a standard nonprofit, in a regular nonprofit, that's the case. The board has hired their executive staff, and that executive staff is accountable to the board. In this situation, obviously, the Friends Group is an independent nonprofit. The staff that they're partnering with is, they're paid for by their salary is paid by someone else, by the organization that they're hired by. So the Friends Group should not, you wouldn't want the leadership to get in the habit of communication with that staff member as if they're accountable to the board, or as if they're doing the job of the board. So there should be a clear distinction there. The partners organization staff is responsible to their own organization. Now that doesn't mean there isn't a partnership between the two, and that there aren't some duties that may fall to the staff of that organization. And in fact, oftentimes there are some duties that fall to the staff of that organization. It's just inherent in the job that they do. And in fact, at our agency, that is part of the job description of some of our site staff, is that they work with the Friends Group organization and help them out with finding meeting space or certain administrative duties, but they are not allowed to spend more than half of their time working with the Friends Group organization, because that's not what taxpayers paid them to do. Taxpayers paid them to fulfill the duties of that organization. So it's very important to keep that line separate. So Friends Group is responsible for its own governance, its donated funds, its advocacy, its membership. Friends Groups must be aware of their partner organization standards and reflect those standards in their programs and projects. Now, let me talk about this for just a minute, because this is another place that people get really stuck. It's important to know that if you are a Friends Group and you're supporting an organization that has certain industry regulations, industry standards, that you're aware of that. Now, what I mean by that is that sometimes a Friends Group can get on a path of thinking that they're going to fundraise for a certain thing that they love. Maybe there's an exhibit that they want to display, to have the organization, the museum display, a special exhibit. Maybe, if it's a historic site, like in our examples, maybe they have an additional add-on, to a building that they want to complete and they want to fundraise for. They want an education room that's added on to a historic building, say. Well, they may get excited about that and get along this path because, obviously there doesn't sound like they're communicating well with their partner organization. And by the time they come to the partner organization with this project that they're very, very excited about it, and the partner organization says, whoa, wait a minute, I can't do that. You know, I can't exhibit this particular type or subject matter because this is not within the confines of our industry standards. I can't add on to this building because I'm subject to the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties. And my agency interprets it this way. So this is a place that I've seen, you know, where friends groups can really get on the wrong path. And the way it happened is that they weren't having that constant communication with their partner organization. So I'll say again, a big key to what we're talking about today is communication, communication, communication. This is going to be very, very important. Again, and what friends groups do and what friends groups do not. If I had one thing to drill into the organization staff members about their friends group organizations is remember that they're volunteers. Remember that they donate their time, their talent, their treasure to your organization, and they love your organization. They have a passion for that organization. They are mission driven. They're there because they want to be, and they want their work to be meaningful. So as staff, it's important to remember that that is often the motivation for a friends group organization, and it's very important to find out what motivates them to be there, find out why they're in the room, so that you can find, as site staff, that you're not just giving them a wish list for them to pay for it, because they most likely won't stay motivated, you know, if they just get a list of things to pay for every year. But you want to bring them along with you to your programs and projects, make sure that they can be as engaged as possible, however that's feasible for you to do so. That they get frequent reports from your program staff, you know, to let them know what's happening at the site, that they get special invitations to be there, that they can find some way to engage with your material, with your programs, with the work that you do, because the reason why they're there is because they love your site, they have a passion for it, and they are mission driven. And if you as the organization staff don't provide opportunities to sort of bring them along, they're not going to be the best ambassadors for your organization. And what you want is a friends group that's engaged and is a great ambassador for your organization, so that when they fundraise and when they advocate, they're doing it from their heart and soul and not out of the duty of, you know, because of an obligation, because they signed up a year ago and now they can't get out of it. So you want to make sure that they continue to love what they do. So those are some of the things that friends groups do and do not, and and it all stems from communication. So I have another poll, and I want to see, has this ever happened to you? These are some of the pitfalls that I see folks fall into, and if none of these have happened to you, that's great. Don't answer, and I applaud you. But I want to know if has your friends group ever started fundraising for a project they couldn't complete for any reason? You know, because the organization wasn't able to do that. Maybe the friends group lost sight of their mission and they embarked on projects that are unrelated to the organization. Maybe the friends group, have you ever heard them say that they felt like an ATM, that they're just uninspired? Or have you heard staff of an organization say, I have no idea what my friends group is doing. I don't know, they get together, they have meetings, and whatever they're doing is on their own? Or have all of these happened? So Emily, if you don't mind launching that poll.
It is up and people are responding. So we'll give everyone a moment, and knowing that some of you don't have friends groups, I'm not going to expect 100% participation. So we'll give everyone a minute to respond. And yes, as Angela said, feel free to select more than one if that applies to you. All right, everyone, just a couple more seconds and then I'll share the results. Right, about 45% of folks responded, and of those, 31% said that the friends group has started fundraising for a project that the staff couldn't complete. 35% of the friends group has embarked on projects unrelated to the partner organization. 39% of the friends group felt uninspired or like an ATM. And then 50% said the staff of the partner organization felt in the dark about the Friends group's activities.
Yeah, that's kind of what I expected. You know, for each of these points, Friends Group started fundraising for a project that staff couldn't complete. Well, that's probably because they may not have known the industry standards, right? They may not have known that that's something that staff didn't have the resources to pull off as staff, right? That's another thing. When a Friends Group loses sight of their mission and embarks on projects unrelated to the organization, a lot of times that's because, like I said, they get on this path of thinking that they have their pet projects that really aren't related to the organization. And that happens too. It really does. And then if they're feeling uninspired and then they say they feel like an ATM, that may be because they're not, you know, being meaningfully engaged with the organization and they're not coming along on the programs and projects that organization they love is doing. Or if they feel in the dark, maybe that's because there aren't opportunities for communication between the two, between the Friends Group and the organization. And I'm going to get to that right about now. So governance, this is all of those situations, and I'm sure y'all could bring up some more. Those are very common pitfalls. And how do you avoid them? Or how do you climb out of them when, not if, but when you fall into them? Because most likely you will at some point. So governance helps with that. This is your communication codified. This is your board, your bylaws, your policies. It establishes how you communicate. So it's the who in your organization. You know, your board members, are they the people that you need in that board? Are they the resources that you need? Do they have the expertise that your organization needs? Do you have the committees that you need to really work on certain projects? Do you need an advisory board? Do you need volunteers? Governance is also the how in your organization. These are your bylaws, your policies, your job descriptions, your MOUs and your MOAs, your formal agreements. And then what all of this does is ensure that your board members are doing what all board members should do for any nonprofit, and that is to fulfill the 3 big duties for nonprofits. And this, again, this is going to go back to the best way that Friends Groups can operate, and it goes back to communication ultimately. That there are 3 main duties of board members for a nonprofit. And number 1 is the duty of care, and that means that your board members show up and that they are making prudent use of all assets by participating actively and making decisions on behalf of the organization, and that they exercise their best judgment. There's a duty of loyalty, and that means that there's no conflict of interest, right? And this is one reason why every organization, every nonprofit should have a conflict of interest policy. And we could go into more about what that means later if you'd like, but duty of loyalty means that the organization comes first. Even if they're a business owner that's related to that organization, know when to recuse, know when to stay out of that vote, because the organization's mission comes first. Know that this is not your private club for your favorite friends. The organization comes first. So that's the duty of loyalty. The duty of obedience means that the Friends Group is abiding by all the rules that it's supposed to abide by, that they're making their report to the IRS every year, that they have a good set of bylaws, that they keep on track with their policies, and that they're aware of best practices as a nonprofit. So governance really just means putting all those communication cues that we just talked about into a framework, articulating your mission, figuring out who does what, when, how, and determining your rules for engagement. That's what governance is. So what are some of the ingredients to a successful Friends Group partnership? Again, I'm going to say clear communication, which means good governance. And the way you get to that, number 1, is to acknowledge that there are going to be inherent differences between the Friends Group and the organization they support, especially if it's a public organization. You want to make sure that you put all that on the table. We're a Friends Group, we're volunteers, we're here because we want to be, we're here because we're passionate about this organization because of X, Y, and Z. It's important to learn your board members' motivations, your Friends Group board members' motivations for being there. I'm a publicly owned organization. I'm here because I studied this for 8 years or whatever. I wrote a book about this. This is my field. This is my field of interest. I love this topic. This is my expertise, and that's why I'm at this site. That's why I'm at this museum. So board members, conversely, should really understand the motivations of the staff that they're working with, the staff that they're partnering with. What types of expertise do they bring? Make your expectations clear. Revisit them from time to time. If that means going on a board retreat or having some facilitated discussion from somebody outside of your board, do that every now and then, because if you can figure out everybody in the room, their motivation for being there, and some of the communication pitfalls that you may be getting into, then you can avoid them, and you can figure out how to climb out of that and get back on the right path, the same path. And remember why you're in the room. Your mission is the same. If you're a Friends Group organization, your mission is to support that organization. And find ways to actively share your goals, your hopes, your dreams for the organization. And like I said, sometimes that's a board retreat. Maybe those are just happy hours for your board to get together, or maybe it's an outing with your board and some of the staff to go to some other museum or site or exhibit or something that you all enjoy, that you can talk informally about what really excites you about being part of that organization, whether you're a Friends Group or the staff. But get to know each other. And then baking in that communication, one of the most important things that people really forget, because they assume, especially if you've had a Friends Group that's been around for a long time and some members that have been there for a long time, is that orientation. Make sure that you know what your Friends Group bylaws are. What kinds of policies do they have? Whether you're a Friends Group board member or you're the staff who works with them. And if you're a Friends Group board member, find out what the industry standards are of the organization that you support. What types of limitations do they have? What are they really working with? Orient yourself to the Friends Group, orient yourself to the organization. And if you're staff working with a Friends Group, make sure that you provide some opportunities for your Friends Group board members to learn more about your industry, about your organization, and to get up to speed on what the current best practices are. A lot of these Friends Group board members are going to be excited to do that. They're there because they like what you do. They like this organization, they believe in it, and they want to know what it is, that you're working on, and what types of best practices are good for your organization. Make sure you write down job descriptions. This is very important, because if you have a board chair and the executive director staff of the organization that you're working with, make sure you know where the line is on who's accountable to whom, who does what. Write it down. And if you can, revisit that from time to time. Every couple of years, make sure that it's fresh and that it still applies. This is important for board members. If you have a board chair and a secretary, a treasurer, make sure that each one of them know their board duties, and that there is a line of what they do and what they don't do and who they're accountable to. Is the treasurer accountable to the chair, or is the treasurer accountable to the committee, or is the treasurer accountable to the board? Usually they're accountable to the board, but make sure you make that clear. If there are committees, what is the role of those committees? What is your job? If you're on that committee, you want to know what your job is. You want to know what your marching orders are. So write down those job descriptions. I would not put them in the bylaws, by the way. The bylaws should be general enough that they can stand the test of time, and you only have to revise them ever so often. I would refer to specific job descriptions and job duties as an addendum to your bylaws that can be changed quickly, if you need to, or amended every year if you need to, without having to have an entire board action. Make sure that your plans, your needs, your updates are communicated by having regular meetings with staff of the organization and with your board leadership. And what this means, this could mean that you have on your calendar a phone call with the board chair every week, every couple of weeks. And what this does is allow you to create items on your communication agenda to talk with the two leaderships can talk to each other about things that come up that week. And it's not, oh, I'm going to call them because I just thought of something. And that, that can be what's a nice way to say it, a nuisance, or, you know, it can really get in the way of someone's job. You want to have respect in your communication patterns with each other. So make sure that you have a planned design for how you communicate with each other. You have regular meetings with each other, even if you have nothing to say. If you have on your calendar that you're going to talk on Fridays at noon, and you really don't have anything that came up that week that you need to know about or talk about, give them a call anyway and say, hey, how are you doing? I don't really have anything on my list, but did anything come up I should know about? Any big donations this week? Did we get any donations for that certain thing? Oh yeah, actually we did. You know, we forgot about that. And so you never know what could come up in those regular meetings. Make sure you put them on your calendar and do it. Communicate. Have staff of the organization that you partner with as an ex officio member of the board. I think this is critical. This is what nonprofits do with their board and the executive director staff, but you can do this too as a Friends Group board and the staff of the organization that you work with. We do that at the Texas Historical Commission. It's in their MOA that the site manager is an ex officio member of the Friends Group board, and they are invited to every board meeting, and they must know about each board meeting at least 2 weeks in advance so that they can put that on their schedule. So, so try to get input from the organization. Find ways, you know, to have your organizations, maybe their program staff gives you an update on about what's going on with their programs to your board, you know, once a month or however often you meet. And that's another way that the board members can get engaged and excited about what it is you're doing and know about what you're doing, so maybe they can attend and be there and see firsthand. And then don't be afraid to do those strategic plans together. 5 years used to be the standard of doing strategic plans. These days it's more like 3 years. I would say these days, some people are having to revise their strategic plans for just a year because of everything that's going on, COVID, the economy, et cetera. But get together with your site staff, with the staff of your organization, and work on a strategic plan together. And I would suggest that you bring someone from outside who doesn't work with you daily to help facilitate that, so that you as the board and the key people on the staff that you work with can work on that strategic plan collaboratively as partners, and neither of you are leading it. That's very important. You should bring in someone from outside to help you with that. And then make sure you have a memorandum of agreement or a memorandum of understanding or some type of policy statement between you, if you're the Friends Group, or you, the organization and the Friends Group. Make sure that you've come to an agreement on how you will communicate, how often you will communicate, and what that really looks like. For our MOAs, we have that site staff, I'm referring to site staff, meaning your organization staff, has to devise the annual plan with the Friends Group board members once a year. They also share budgets once a year. They have, as I said, staff members and ex officio member of the board. They have to be notified of board members. All of these are the touch points in their communication that need to be codified in a memorandum of agreement. So with that, just remember that you're all in the same room for the same reason. That Friends board members are here because they want to be here. They're mission driven. They believe in the organization. Staff of that organization, they're a team member with the Friends Group. It's not them over here and the other over there. You all should really be working on creating that good governance that codifies your communication and creates a good team together, and codifies that you're working together with respect, that you're trusting each other, that you're engaging each other, you're communicating. Now, who has questions?
Oh, there's lots of questions. All
Oh,
right,
boy.
they're already rolling in, so we're gonna do our best to get through a lot of these. And
if not, I can email later too, right?
Absolutely, yes. In the next 10 minutes or so. So this one's, let me see if you can get your camera on there, Angela.
Oh, right.
No worries. There you are. Oh, you disappeared again. Come back.
Oh no. Sorry about that.
There you are. Okay. Someone asked us a quick question, but I thought this could be a helpful analogy, potentially. If friends groups are kind of like political action committees in that they're able to do things that the organization can't do. Is that a good analogy?
Mm-hmm, yes. It could be. Yeah.
Then there were a few questions about related to meetings for boards and for friends groups, I'm sorry, and if they have to follow the same open meeting act rules and stuff as a state agency, let's say, would have to.
No. Well, okay. As an independent nonprofit, if you're your own 501c3, then the rules that you have to abide by are those rules by the IRS, Secretary of State. You do not have to follow the same Open Meetings Act as the organization. So,
Okay.
so right, yeah. So I'll just leave it at that because I think that's a good answer. No, the answer is no.
And it does it make sense for a friends group to include anything in their bylaws about their, like, someone asked specifically about having meetings over Zoom versus in person, or is that getting too granular for bylaws?
No, I think in your bylaws, you at least here in Texas, I think this is the Texas Secretary of State. So check your state's requirements, but we have to put in our bylaws how we come to decisions and how we make votes. If we use Robert's Rules of Orders or some other form of decision making, what a quorum is, all those things. Inherent in that is where you meet and how often you meet and if you're making votes and it's an email vote, then yes, you need to put that in your bylaws, how those votes are made.
And on the topic of voting, are ex officio staff members voting members of that group? No. Okay.
No, that's what that means, is that they're there to inform, but they don't have to vote.
How can, I realize this is going to vary depending on the organization, but can you talk about a little bit the difference between a friends group versus a membership group of an organization? Or I know sometimes organizations have organized volunteer groups, maybe they have their own board. How does that differ from a friends group?
I think, I don't know if there's a specific definition for that, but for a friends group is a nonprofit supporting partner. So that means they have their 501c3. Now, if you have a group of volunteers that you call upon, that's a volunteer group, right? And I don't know if that's getting to the answer to this question, but there may be other nonprofits that don't operate as a fundraising mechanism, but the big difference there is that it's a nonprofit whose mission is to support that organization. That's really the bottom line of what a friends group is that it's in their mission statement. Your name as the organization's name is in their mission statement, and therefore they are inexorably tied to that organization because they're using your name as an organization. I hope that makes sense.
No, I think that does, absolutely. Well, and I'm just curious on those lines, if you've heard of, maybe a group that started off as a volunteer group or some sort of membership group transitioning to a friends group as they saw a need for fundraising or that kind of additional support.
I think that happens a lot, and yes, I have seen that. And in fact, there's in that resource list, I think it's there's a link to an article about just that, about he talks about the steps of forming a friends group, and he talks about it as a volunteer group that sort of gets more and more organized and says, we need a 501c3. It happens quite frequently. But the steps would be the same. You still would want to start with that, with a really focused group to talk about what it is exactly you need and what you need that friends group to do.
What if you have a friends group that has kind of not really very active, and you're looking for ways to revitalize that friends group, or they're just so busy with everything else that you want to find ways to encourage them to take a more direct role in fundraising and supporting the organization?
You know what I would suggest, and I guess it depends on each group and what the specific circumstances, but I think it's really important to get people together every now and then and have, I know people hate the words board retreat. Sometimes they think it's a waste of time or it takes too much time, but something like that gets you all together to find out what their motivations are for being there. There's, you know, I've done this with some groups. It's getting to your why, or getting to, you know, what's important about, what's their motivation. And if you can figure out folks' motivation for being there and try to make opportunities to meet those motivations, if you're the staff, you know, trying to motivate your board, your friends group board, really try to get to know them and see what is it they feel like they're not, you know, why are they there in the first place? And if they're not motivated, it probably means that they don't feel like they're very useful. So if you can figure out, like, you know, what it is they feel like they're missing, and then try to provide more and more opportunities to engage them with your organization. That could be, you know, maybe they have some volunteer docent roles, or you know, maybe they get to make some opening remarks at an exhibit opening, and really get to know that exhibit, you know, and that, you know, find ways to excite them about what you're doing. The rest, I think, follows, whether it's fundraising, you know, because fundraising really isn't about asking for money. It's about asking people to support something you're excited about or you feel is important, and matching the right people to, you know, to the thing that you think is important. And if a friends group member thinks of it that way and they're really excited, then it's not going to be a chore to them. Yeah, so I would say engagement is key.
Thank you. We have a few questions about memos of understanding or memos of agreement, how often they should be updated, and where folks could find good examples of those to work from.
Well, I'm happy to share ours. We updated ours in 2016, and you know, you have my email address, so please email me if that's something you'd like to see. When we updated ours, what we did is we went through the Council of Nonprofits and made sure that we reflected all of the best practices for nonprofits, and we simply, you know, made sure that that was reflected in our memorandum of agreement. And then there are certain things that our organization staff members need, and that was the annual plan. They needed to make sure they were working with their friends group to make that annual plan, so there are opportunities for communication between the two. Put that in there. I would say if you can Google templates for MOUs, MOAs, and a lot of them will come up. But I would go to an organization that you know that is working well and ask them to share theirs with you if it's one that's similar to your organization, because I think nonprofit folks love to share, you know, what they work on. They kind of have to, because they're beholden to, you know, to transparency. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask, and ask me, and I'll share for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, if you'll send that to me as well, Angela, then if I get any requests, I can pass that along too. Mm-hmm. We just have a couple more moments, but someone did ask if there are examples of museums, whether or other types of organizations where a friends group either isn't necessary or it can actually serve as an impediment to the organization.
Well, isn't necessary. I guess it depends on your organization. You know, if you're rolling in the dough and you have plenty of, you know, admission tickets that are sold, and you don't need the money, and for whatever reason you don't need the advocacy, and plenty of people in your community know about you and love you, then maybe you don't need a friends group. Maybe you just need a volunteer group. I think it's good to have volunteers, obviously, and people in the community that are engaged. Yes, there are times that friends groups can be an impediment, for sure. And those would be those times that I mentioned where communication really breaks down and where they're getting off track and they're starting to think of their friends group as their own social club. That's one of the big ones that I see. Another one is when they're providing something, or they want to provide something that the organization doesn't need. You know, maybe they love to be docents, but the organization says, I don't really need docents, I have staff for that. And they're insisting on being docents. And, you know, you need, this is, again, you know, another time that communication is really broken down. So I would say, try to make sure you're creating an annual plan together so that there's an opportunity for the organization staff to say, this is what I need. Can you provide it? No, can't. Okay, don't want to, then maybe we need to take a break for a while and bring in new members or find another way for you to serve.
Thank you, Angela. This has been really helpful. We have some more questions. You all are just full of questions, which is fabulous, but we are at time. So I'm going to share your questions, which have your emails attached to them, with Angela, so she can follow up with a few of you after the fact. So we really appreciate all of you for being here today. And thank you so much to Angela. This has been really helpful. The webinar is being recorded, and the recording, along with the slides and the resources, will be available on our webpage within the next day or so. You'll be asked to complete a brief survey when the webinar concludes, and we really appreciate you taking the time to do so, as it helps us plan future webinars. That was kind of how we ended up doing this one, because we got so much good feedback on a previous webinar about people who wanted to learn more about Friends groups. So thank you so much to Angela. Thank you to everyone who participated today. And that will conclude our webinar. Thank you.
Great. Good luck, everybody.